across the Product Lifecycle podcast. Ugly Christmas sweater edition. We're going to talk today about tribal knowledge and AI, and I'm really excited to have Rob Ferrone, one of my regular panelists on the Future PLM podcast, as well as Wang, someone I've met recently from a startup called EverCurrent, who has made it her mission to work on tribal knowledge. So I'll let maybe Ye introduce yourself, and then Rob.
Awesome. Yeah, so glad to be on the podcast. So I'm calling from San Francisco, so it's early morning right here.
We can see the
Um,
birds flying behind you sometimes, right?
yes, yeah, we're actually Oakland, so we're next to the ocean, like the bay. Yeah, it's a nice
I
spot.
miss the A's already, even though I don't live there, but okay.
Yeah, awesome. So my background, I really came from like a computer science background, but all my career has been working on the bleeding edge of building software for hardware. So I started my career doing more like 3D printing, topology optimization, like the cool stuff, more than a decade ago at MIT and Autodesk. I think the lesson I learned from that experience was like fast iteration really brings innovation for hardware teams. After that, I joined Onshape when it was small. It's a very MIT heavy team in
Yeah.
Boston. And, it was a time WebGL just came out and was so impressive when I first saw their demo. It was like, wow, you can build an engine in your browser. I was like, okay, this is the team I'm going to join. And I think now it's like picking up a lot of speed. And it's becoming more and more mainstream. I actually see large teams using Onshape. After that, started my first startup in construction tech. I'll skip a little bit, and then the last several years, I've been leading generative AI research for automotive at Autodesk. I think that's where I encounter a lot of tribal knowledge. I think before I work with like teams of different size, hardware development team, small, medium, large. But when I started working with large teams, I realized they not only not just because you have more resource you have your tribal knowledge together. Sometimes some of the teams have even more issues managing their tribal knowledge, and they have so much, they're sitting on well but they don't know how to use it. And when we came in, like trying to bring AI technology, I think the biggest blocker is how do you use your tribal knowledge so you can use AI in a way that's actually beneficial for your operation. Anyway, so that's the whole inspiration of starting EverCurrent. So EverCurrent is AI native platform, really trying to get people's knowledge together, getting the dependency together, getting people to understand the impact of change, to track the impact of change. Yeah,
And you found it this year, right? This is a pretty new
that's right.
venture
I
for
found
you.
it this
That's
year.
exciting.
Yeah, yeah, and we're backed by like Season Z, Speedrun, and many other amazing investors.
That's awesome. Rob, you and I have go way back. So how I know that
Mm.
that's one of your shticks is tribal knowledge, and of course you're welcome to pitch Share PLM's conference coming up because they would be talking about that there too, right? Up in a
Yeah,
couple of months.
yeah. I think maybe something that people don't realize about me or don't know about me, because I'm often reacting to PLM content or creating PLM content. But and I've adopted the term PLM for managing product data across the life cycle within complex engineering environments. But actually, um, I never really interacted much with PLM systems. I was far more involved on the human side, the process side, the actual information flow, and the business side. So I've been working in engineering environments for 25 years, and I've been making PLM work. Been bringing PLM to life, and I started a company which had an army of people which brought PLM to life. And so I really understand the context around engineering, manufacturing, and service and maintenance, um, in terms of getting the right information in the right format to the right people at the right time in order to drive the right outcomes. And so I think when we have conversations around PLM, so much of the conversation is focused on technology and even if we're not talking about a PLM system but a system architecture, it's technology based. But that that is almost ignoring 90% of what makes PLM as a business strategy come to life, and that is the people involved, the conversations, the meetings, where things attract even PMO. And so that's why I'm really excited to be here today, and to be able to get into what Yi's doing and what she's thinking around what our product's going to do, because I had an army of 400 people doing this kind of work, and I think that actually what Yi's proposing could be the next generation of that type of work.
Very cool. Well, some of the people on the call may not quite understand this term tribal knowledge, or maybe we ought to, pose it and put some boundaries around it so we know really what we're talking about. I don't know who wants to field that one, but how would you guys define tribal knowledge? With respect to engineering and manufacturing, of course.
I'm curious about Rob's definition. I
All
think
right, go for it, Rob.
everyone has a different definition. I will just quickly say, what I think this is. I think this is a term. Say you're an aerospace company, right? You're an aerospace company, and then you hire the most talented engineers. A lot of engineers might work on, say, Apple, right? But then you come into like working in aerospace, then they will say, oh, there's a lot of tribal knowledge we need to pass to these new people, super talented engineers, but you just have never developed airplane before. And I think the reason, like they say, tribal knowledge is more maybe also because it's only existing tribal memory, like it's only in some people's heads of how we do things, right? And what are the dead paths to avoid? And it has been really difficult to document that. That's just my take. I'm curious what
Right.
Rob
Yeah.
thinks. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the culture, it's the habits, and the stuff in built into people that have been in the organization and the industry for a long time. I'll give you a couple of concrete examples. I know an automotive startup company that is referring to standards, automotive standards, and they're very keen on having that with their suppliers. Whereas a lot of the established automotive companies, they've gone beyond that because they actually have their own standards, their own kind of tribal ways of doing things, and so they don't actually reference the standards anymore. Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about this is there's it's pros and cons. So it can be super valuable in the sense that everyone just knows instinctively what they need to do and the right way of doing things. But on the other hand, you have this is the way we've always done it. And actually, that holds people back sometimes, and that's why a lot of companies are now saying, what else is out there? Like what insight can you bring from the outside world in? And I think there's a lot of companies at the moment as well that are shedding workforce, and I've seen firsthand the issues caused by that, where tribal knowledge is leaving the building, and companies don't know how to make decisions anymore. They're going back to basic problems that were fixed in the past because people just instinctively knew, go to this system, go to this place, speak to that person. Oh no, we can't do that, or yes, we do it in this way. Whereas it's like people having to go through that learning curve all again.
So maybe I suppose that there could be also a bit of entropy, because if people are not using the system, it's just going to get worse. And if people are, well, if you implemented a PLM but you didn't take the people into account in the first place, then it's got a kind of in a bad standing, and then it just gets worse over time as people talk about it, and the tribal knowledge kind of erodes the confidence in the tools. I guess EverCurrent was designed to sort of correct that direction, right? To kind of
I wouldn't
get
say
things back
corrected.
into the straight and narrow.
Yeah, I think we're not trying to correct anything. I think we plug into a lot of market movement. I was reading this report yesterday, right? Like if you look at VC money, like early seed, there are a lot more money going into hardware these days. I think what it reflects is like there are a lot of innovation that people are actually really excited about hardware these days. What are the new innovation of like, physical things that people can bring to the world to change the world in very fundamental ways? I think the other part is development speed. People needs a lot more development speed. That there were traditional companies, maybe their cycle still using very waterfall kind of process, right? Their cycle might be 4 years, right? From planning to actually shipping the product. Does that help them to stay very competitive in this market? Maybe not. Maybe it needs to be 3 years. Maybe it needs to be 2 years. Maybe it needs to be 1 year, right? But I think like reflecting back, what Rob was saying was really interesting. Is like there is also some muscle memory in how you've been doing things, right? For organizations that always forget their tribal knowledge, they have issues. They run into bigger risks. For companies, that understand and remember their tribal knowledge so well and following so well, they might have a little bit like speed issue or innovation issue. So anyway, so coming back, I think fundamentally like hardware, people are really busy. You're always like racing towards releasing, then you're starting a new program. There's very little time for you to, sit back to be like, okay, I think this time we can do this program totally differently. And let me play out the scenarios. Like there's no time for people to do that kind of thing. Or you're always putting out fire when things are happening. When your PCB is stuck in the custom, you're sitting there figuring that out instead of thinking like fundamentally, how can the development cycle be different? What are the new options there? Anyway, so coming back to that, I think EverCurrent is really like, first of all, getting your tribal knowledge together so you can reuse some of the knowledge, you can onboard people faster. Like I think all basic stuff. But the bigger thing is like, let AI in the background to help certain things run a little bit more smoothly. You release a little bit more time, more capacity for engineering team to focus the innovation that you want to focus on. So that's kind of like my perspective around it. Yeah.
Rob?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things to bring into this conversation. One of them was actually Oleg mentioned in a post yesterday. He talked about AI automation and agents, and he was saying that rightly so as well. You can't just have AI agents automating the processes of today, because the real advantage is to actually change completely the way that work is being done. So you're not looking to kind of replace the activities that people are doing, but rethink it. So completely deconstruct it. And if you look at any engineering operation, manufacturing operations, and the process of product innovation, and really deconstructed that work. So what time is being spent looking for information? What time is being spent communicating? What time is being spent thinking? And if you take the tasks and deconstruct that all out, then you'll be able to see, okay, why is it being done like that? Okay, it's being done like that because that's the way it's evolved. There's a human involved, so that it has to be done like this because that's the human to human interface. But actually, if we looked at this with fresh eyes, we would do this completely differently. And I think that's the really interesting space here and the opportunity, and that's why I think again that what Yi's doing has got, this could be the way to actually create the leap in PLM and engineering ops that we've not necessarily seen with systems alone. So I think that's for me the kind of exciting space.
I want to add to that a little bit, if possible. I was just chatting with some engineer friends yesterday. We're talking about the complexity tax engineering teams pay, right? And that basically can be up to like say 1/3 of your engineering capacity. I think people just didn't realize that. What's that complexity tax is basically Rob mentioned is like gathering context. Figuring out, right? Like people sometimes don't realize engineers spend a lot of time gathering context, understanding whose change affects me, right? Who I need to talk to. Documentation, right? Like this thing has happened, other people need to know. And the ripple effects, the more complex system you build, the ripple effects are just harder for anyone to know, to understand. And those are the things, I think traditionally are managed in a hard-coded ways. If you have a very good PLM system, right, you follow those steps. But then the process, then what happens is the process can be long because it takes a bunch of people to review it, right? And then people start to have side process that they do not get into their change management as often. I think the way we look at how we fit in, is, your side process also need a little bit understanding of the dependency of the change, right? And then let's first help you get through that. But it's very, very important to understand what are the critical dependencies and how you propagate it through. And that is an AI system, better job for AI system than for any individual to kind of try to piece it together, spending so much time piecing that together.
We had this podcast the other day, didn't we, about the 737 MAX, and Patrick loves talking about complexity, and he argues that actually what we need to be doing is focused on reducing complexity. But I'm totally with Yi in the sense that when we used to sit in a room, when teams used to sit in a room and they could communicate directly, you had very low friction. And then you started to have departments, functions, silos, people sitting in different buildings. You had different teams. You then had to create the systems and the PMO to actually, coordinate people and integrate people. And that's added a huge layer as an overhead, for your business. And then you've got, within a big OEM, big companies, you have, people who are their role in that business is integration between teams. It's to do the the processes in the background in parallel, just to make the core stuff work. And saying that, it's interesting because in many companies they're bloated and they have too much headcount making the business work, being the oil in the gearbox. And in the startups, the parallel I draw is like an orchestra coming together that have never played before. They've got lots of talented musicians, but they're writing the music as they're playing it, and they're trying to get a feeling of how to work together. Sorry, yeah,
they're jamming it. Doing the music.
And I hear people say, look, what's the playbook for this? As we talked about earlier on, Tribal Knowledge is an automotive startup, is an aerospace startup. What do we need to know? And everyone's got a slightly different perspective because they've got different backgrounds, etc. But to actually have not even necessarily the playbook specific to the industry, but like, what do you need in order to work together? And if you don't even have to think about that, because what normally happens is you have teams coming in and creating the bureaucracy and the processes. But if you had this kind of capability, something that Yi is bringing to the party, you can actually get people working together in synchronized ways, very low friction, without the overheads. So I think it's gonna lift startups, and then it's gonna make larger companies more agile and faster.
But that tendency to break things first, right, to fail fast, that's sort of the whole thing in the new industry, which is that when I thought of tribal knowledge, I was thinking more of traditional manufacturing, where it's a bit slower and it's not, we don't want to break first, fail first, we want to fail later, because we need to get the design done, and we need, it seems like there's a big change, or a big difference between traditional manufacturing, aerospace or automotive or industrial equipment, and what you were describing, Ye, in terms of let's fail fast, and then
I don't
do
think
the next
hardware
rev.
can fail first and fail fast. you're really gonna fail. I think it's really different from software. I think a lot of startups, I'm in the Bay Area, so I meet a lot of, like, say, robotic startups and so on. I think people are also like having tribal knowledge, right? And people are relying on like getting people with a lot of deep knowledge to come to the team to be like, oh, how can we ship this thing with lower risk, right? How can we actually go to market? I think the difference, coming back to agile a little bit that you guys mentioned, I think the goal is not to say how to say that you run this like 2 weeks sprint, right? And you don't have gated process anymore. I don't think that's how hardware, like successful company I've seen running agile do, right? I think they still have gated process, but they also have agile. The thing is, like, you always want to do the testing first. You want to understand the market needs you, right? You don't want to run this very deep, very long process, and in the end, right, like the market has changed, right? Or there's not enough demand. I think agile is good in the way that you can put something, maybe there's more frequent integration point, testing point, and so on, that you can go to market. I think that's a goal of startup. And I think large companies also need that. I think a lot of large companies are looking at how can they do, more innovative products that maybe have more software integrated into it. I think a lot of the manufacturers might be more on the mechanical, electrical side, but then a lot of the margin of hardware comes from, what kind of software experience, subscription experience you can bring to your product, because your hardware might be collecting so much data, and that's very valuable for your customers, but you just traditionally had no way to use those data to help your customers' business. Then they are looking at new ways also, right? And like software traditionally always like kind of have been a long time running in agile. Then people have this issue of, wow, software is running this kind of process. How it's running a very traditional process. How do we get people to work together, right? And how can requirement be passing? And
But
you
is
might
this
not, wait for like 100%, like all the requirement locked for you to move to the next stage. Then what do you do? Yeah. Anyway, going back to you, Michael.
but is there a fundamental difference between when you're in this very fast-paced, 21st century Bay Area hardware startup thing, to the fact that in the more traditional manufacturing arena, you've got an aging workforce that's going to retire, and that tribal knowledge is going to walk out the door with them, right? That's maybe less of a concern in these fast-moving hardware companies, but a really big concern with a lot of companies you've worked with, Rob, right?
Yeah, no, it is. But I think so there's multiple elements to this. There's knowing how to work together, and having the tribal knowledge associated with that industry. If you're a startup, you might be working on something like the EV TOL craft that people are creating. There isn't much tribal knowledge there, or even knowledge about that product and that industry, so they're kind of making it up as they go along. But I think to kind of come back to the logic around what Yi's been working on, and Yi, correct me if I'm wrong or not, but it's ultimately I think it's closer linked to lean, if you like, but lean operations, and really serving humans and the people that are making decisions, the people that are manually tracking information, or like you go into a meeting, you take notes, and then you're reliant on the person who's taken the notes to do then the follow-up. For me, that's all part of PLM, because you're driving the product forward. And I think what you're proposing is that there's smarter ways and better ways of doing this, and like recording information, getting information to people, taking information out of people, and helping people to orchestrate the work that needs to be done. Is that right?
Exactly. I can give a concrete example. Let's say you're a robotics team, right? You're doing some kind of warehouse robots, right? Have a chassis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you went to a meeting, and then you heard from, because like the product, you heard from a customer that, like the payload need to be increased for this customer, right? A very typical thing that coming, but you are about to go into DBT, and that requirement just dropped. So everything needs to move fast for you to adjust a bunch of things, right? And then, so of course, like chassis team get it first, because you deal with the payload directly, right? The chassis team got it first, had made a couple of changes, right? And they forgot to tell the battery team maybe, and some other teams that will be like directly affected, right? Or testing teams that's buying equipments right now. And maybe your chassis is bigger, like equipments need to be adjusted. In that short amount of time, a bunch of things can be missed. And that's a kind of the gap we say, like always kind of exists but who's gonna be responsible for catching up with those gaps? So with EverCurrent, what happens is like, say, this meeting happened, you have a meeting recording. Like it automatically tells the product manager, show up, like say, this meeting has happened. Your requirements seem to not matching what you discussed in the meeting. Surfaced it. The product manager look at it, oh, accept. Directly go to the AI pulled up on the right with your meeting notes, like cheat sheet. We basically provided you the cheat sheet, and then your requirements on the left. You can just copy things in, and then when you make that change, then AI also said, oh, the requirement has changed, notifying the engineering manager, requirement, and the product manager. Does this seems like a payload issue? Do you want to let your chassis team know? Right? And then you just accept. And then again, it just directly sends to your team. And then when chassis team made the change, right? And you say, oh, your testing team actually preparing things. And your testing team probably have a lot of things at a time before DVT to deal with. All these requests coming from the supplier team, from your engineering team, last minute changes, all come together for the testing plan together. So it's all bundled together, right? So the testing team just like can have the peace of mind. They don't need to ping all these different people. Is there anything changing? I overheard this session, but have the peace of mind. I sit here, I see a task list, right? That all the people from product, supply, from engineering sent to me. And I also have the context attached to all these different requests. And AI prepares some cheat sheet for me. And I can also include them in the same conversation and until I close this issue. It's just like, so it doesn't really change fundamentally how you make decisions with the right information. I think the thing we do is we just want you to get those information easier, faster, right? Because things do change quickly in an organization. And that's when gap happens and big misses can happen as well.
Yeah. And that's ultimately real-time configuration management. And you have people these days in organizations who are the person in the room who says, hold on a minute, you're doing something here. Is luck, it's lucky that I'm in this meeting because I know the person that might be affected by this, and I'll go and talk to them. I'll go to their desk and what have you. And this is a smarter way of doing that. So it's like always on, always listening, always plugged in, always connected.
And I think in the end, it comes back to the tribal knowledge of the whole team, right? I think people learn by doing. I actually believe people learn by doing, right? It's like if I'm a new engineer coming to the team, I might not know that, but if AI told me, oh, this is why it's related, I learned that. I did that once and I learned that, right? And it's automatic. It doesn't take the other senior engineer's time for the junior engineer to be onboarded to how things supposed to be done. Where are the risks, right? How to avoid risk, introducing bigger risks into the program, right? I really believe, kind of people learn by doing, and then that's a really good way to just, get the whole team understanding of, the consequences of change much faster.
There's actually a question from Elon Madjar in the chat. What is your take regarding the relationship between intellectual property and tribal knowledge? How do these two interact within a business context? Are tribal knowledge and IP complementary or conflicting concerns? While I do recognize the benefits of tribal knowledge for competitive advantage, I also see potential concerns regarding the protection and sharing of IP related to internal processes. So who wants to aim at that one?
Yeah.
You're nodding. I think you've got an answer.
I would say I can tell you a little bit. I actually don't quite understand the question directly, like which angle of concern, but I can tell you a little bit like how we approach IP and how we do that. And I would love to have the person maybe clarifying the question a little bit, maybe putting a scenario to help me understand a little bit more. We are very, very careful about IP. And the way to do that is basically giving a team full control of what other things that should be flowing around and what other things that you should not. Right. Things like a program. I would say a lot of times it's a lot of beneficial for everyone to understand the program. People are usually very open to share the full program. Product requirements, I think people want everyone mostly to understand what are the product requirements you are developing towards. We track requirements, right? And we track the design changes because those are the things traditionally people can get to see it as well. So I don't know but then there were definitely secret sources and you don't need to share and you shouldn't share if you don't want more people to see it. The other part of this is where for aerospace customers, we are basically ITAR compliant. So we're totally in the GovCloud. So we deal with the data with a lot of care. And for normal clients, more commercial clients, we're SOC 2. Those are the first things we're building like day one. Because data security is the most important things, right? But I'm kind of curious. I actually didn't really quite understand the question as much. Yeah.
I mean, if I'm just thinking out loud here, but so you've got product IP, which which is well, you mentioned secret sauce. I think I've always said that companies cook with the same water. So a lot of people say, ask me for benchmarking and saying what does this other company do and how do they do PLM, etc. But ultimately it's unique to the company but the secret sauce then is the softer stuff like the culture, the leadership, the tribal knowledge that we've spoken about, etc. So that's an interesting one because if you are capturing that and that way of working and let's say the AI brain of that organization, I think that is a big differentiator. But as you say, Yi, then if that information's secure, then you should be okay.
Yeah, I think the other thing I think a lot of what brings a company success is innovation. In the end, is innovation is your speed of go to market with lower risks, right? So yes, you can hide certain things, but as long as it doesn't hurt your innovation, right? But a lot of times is you want your team to feel more ownership as well. I think some of the big organizations, like I observe that the individual engineer might not even know what the thing he's doing contributing to the bigger milestone. Like there's a bit disconnection between what the engineer is working on to the company goal and so on. And that's the kind of culture shift I really hope this new era of AI tools can help bring. Like people feel more ownership of the work they are doing. They understand it. And people the whole organization are working on the top priorities. People have shared understanding of the priority and so on, right? That just makes everyone feel more engaged and go forward faster.
I think the point that I was struggling to articulate earlier on about IP is if you assume that the IP relates to the product itself and the solution, whether it's the software or the hardware, I think the thing that needs real facilitation is the way that people work together, the way that people collaborate on that solution and that product, and therefore let's say the actual product and software, etc. itself is less on the critical path in terms of the conversation we're having right now, and it's more about the way that people work together and the smarter brain about not forgetting stuff, not being misaligned. And so, but as I said before, I think that is part of the secret sauce. If you've got, you look at race teams, look at the Formula One pit stop teams, how practiced they are and how fast they are because of all of the stuff, the way that they work, etc. And that is secret sauce. And ultimately, But if it's secure.
The other thing I want to quickly add is, IP protection is extremely important for hardware teams to create a barrier, like a competitive advantage for you. And oftentimes filing that, takes a lot of materials. So one way people look at us is we can actually track a lot of the different things and ideas. This is for traceability, both for compliance and I think can potentially be IP. Yeah.
Elon respecified his question in the chat. He
Mhm.
said the risk of specific internal company processes becoming public. For instance, a company utilizing a unique configure to order process would not want this proprietary information to be accessible to competitors because it's tribal
Oh,
knowledge.
yeah, yeah.
It goes to the way your product gathers data into the AI model, and then it gets shared with the tribe.
Oh, no, no, it does not. It does not. We never share data between organizations.
So the
So it
tribe
is
is
based
defined as within the four walls of the company, not
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
tribe as
yeah,
in
yeah.
all aerospace engineers working on
Yeah,
rockets,
yeah,
right?
and like for like more like say aerospace defense related customers, they use their own AI models. Some are hosting their own AI models. We can plug into whatever infrastructure you want, and then even if you're using like say Bedrock models on AWS, it just stays there. It does not go to another. We never cross train between customers. That would be disastrous. Yeah.
But it makes me wonder, like, how do you separate the stuff that needs to go into the system of record from the stuff that's just tribal? Like, how do you differentiate between
Mhm.
that information that's very important for the bomb in order to actually build the thing and stuff that's more wishy-washy, a little bit more, touchy-feely on how processes work, I guess is, how do you sort those things out? Rob, do you
In
have some
some way,
ideas on that?
in some
Or
way,
Well,
we do not. But I'm kind of curious what Rob's
well, no,
thoughts are.
let me predict your answer here. You tell me if I get it right or not. But
do
I
a thumbs up
assume,
or thumbs down, right?
yeah, I assume that things like ERP, PLM, etc., PLM as a system, and all the other systems of record will continue to exist, and that
Yes,
information will exist in those places. And then what you're doing is then more facilitating the consolidating that information and checking it and flagging any disconnects and flagging things to people and saying, hey, have a look at this because what you're showing in the E-bomb is different to what you're doing in the M-bomb and that kind of thing.
exactly. Thumbs up.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have prediction. I feel old systems are still gonna be there, but people need a modern experience, right? Right. If you want to increase the capacity of the team, right? Like you don't want people to and people and younger people, I think especially, right, would not want those kind of jobs. Just checking the gaps between systems. People
Mm.
are like in their private life they are using AI. They're like everything's going so fast, and they don't want in the work life to be doing jobs that's is too prescriptive, right? So really what we do is we don't want to create interruption to your operation. We sit on top of your existing system providing a more modern experience, and the experience we provide is like we understand all the difference, like all the changes you're making, and we just try to orchestrate the change, like making sure the people who have dependency on the change also get to know it. And then when people get that change coming as a request, right, and we make sure we prepare some cheat sheet and getting you also the context around that change and translating that. I think people don't realize is in Harvard there's a lot of translation happening. Right, your supply chain team doesn't always understand all the things your engineering team is talking about. you know so doing that translation, preparing a cheat sheet, getting things like just a little bit smoother, more like people can focus at work. AI brings information in.
Yeah, and this is I posted the other day about the total cost of doing PLM, and when people think about PLM, they often talk about PLM systems, as I said, and if you compare PLM systems, okay, maybe you can save a tiny bit of money if you switch from one system to another, but the think about if you can make your workforce 30% more efficient, or if you could do 50% more with the team that you have, that's huge. We're
It's
talking big
huge.
money there.
Yeah,
So this is the the part of PLM that people aren't really thinking about, but they actually should be.
yeah, I think this is already happening in software, like with AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading the same report I was reading about like startups. So people who are, say graduating from seed, going to Series A, the size of the company, like basically people getting the same amount of investment, but the size of software company is like nearly halved, right? It's really happening in my day-to-day work, right? Just how much an engineer can bring to the table, how fast we can put something to address our customers' needs, fundamentally shifted. I think hardware will welcome a moment like that as well. But you need to get your knowledge together first to welcome a moment like that. Yeah.
It's interesting because I talked yesterday with Siskit, so they're doing requirements management, but basically using Git because they think that, well, Steve Massey, the founder, recognized that software is much more agile, much faster to adapt than these old kludgy, clunky requirements management systems,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
reminded me also of how uh, now I'm gonna lose my train of thought. Well, just I've seen a lot of other startups doing things that were really, really innovative around that, of just trying
Mhm.
to accelerate um, and imitate some of the success in software so that hardware companies could move faster.
Yeah.
I think in the pre-show also, you were mentioning something about quality. You wanted to talk about quality and tribal knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. I think like in any hardware company, they're always like trying to balance three things, right? You're balancing quality, you're balancing a schedule and cost. I think traditionally some people say that you can only pick two out of three to focus on just because of how much like resource you have and so on. I think there's a big story to tell about quality around how AI can help. Having traceability, or like actually implementing the V model in like a lot of different places in your, it's actually really useful for the organization. But nobody has that resource to do those kind of validation and to really track things in meaningful ways, right? Like it requires a whole team to have a total different level of documentation. Medical device companies, spend a lot of time doing that because of the requirements. But can that be beneficial for other companies? Probably in some degree, yes. But people do not want to have that cost, spend that cost of totally changing organizing to do documentation. I think
Mm.
the way I look at opportunities like or who we power, we really want to empower first of all, of course, engineering managers to unlock the capacity of the engineering team. We want to power like TPMs who are just like always doing this like integration, or integration teams doing this integration. It's a very difficult job. And then we also want to really power system engineers, right? Like I think even with like one person with systems like ours, we're hoping to see is it can really make a lot of impact on the full organizing by reducing the risks of the products you're bringing to the market.
What to preempt a question from Michael? What does this mean for young people getting into the industry? Is this taking away jobs from young people? Is it because they would classically come in and they would have to learn the ropes, have the mentors training them, and um, they would also do the junior roles often just to get up to speed on the business. And is this actually advantageous to them in the sense that they could come in and have a faster impact on the business, or is it taking the work away from them in the sense that they won't have the kind of classic graduate and entry level jobs? Question to you, Yi.
I was waiting for Michael to.
No, it's
Oh, that's a
definitely
question Michael
my
would
next
ask.
question. So, as Rob
Yeah,
said, he preempted it. Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah. I can tell from like my personal experience building my team. I have very senior engineers, but I also have very junior engineers, and the impact that junior engineers are making, like new grads from college are making, I would say, are much more than what I had back in the day when I first graduated. I think people bring a lot of new thoughts. I think new generation bring so much new thoughts. They're much more native to AI. They are very good at using a lot of different tools. And then I think people who are good engineers get more opportunity to focus on the engineering problem. So I don't think, like, I think people who are very good with AI to kind of, multiply their powers by, several, like maybe two today, or maybe more, even more tomorrow, who knows. I think we'll always have opportunity. And I think also what you see, what's very interesting in the market is also there's more hardware startups. And not all these founders had, say, 10 years of hardware development experience. Some hardware startup founders, they might came from totally non-hardware background, right? And I think that's going to be a lot more, like, because people have their personal experience and knowing this problem needs to be solved. Let's say like last mile delivery of robotics, right? Like people who understand that problem so immediately might want to work on something to change, their world. And I think AI will empower so many people, right? I think the more people can come into hardware and bring innovation to the physical world, and that's what we're excited about. Yeah.
Because I've interviewed quite a few startups in the last few months, and I always ask that question. And a lot of people have of the founders have said, well, the younger generation needs to focus on the fundamentals because no AI is going to tell is necessarily going to be able um, to interpret a result and tell you whether that was good engineering or not, right? And that's really only from doing
Yeah,
the math and having gone through it that you can look at something and immediately say, no, that's a hallucination. There's no way it works like this.
I would disagree with that a little bit. Yes, definitely fundamentals is important, right? You need to have very good judgment around your thing. But I feel AI will get smarter. It will also understand the fundamentals, like, say in a couple of years, right? Very well. If I work at Autodesk research, a lot of the research we're doing are more like cutting edge, not in, in the real world yet, but like it's pushing the boundary. So I know, like, things like, say, the fundamental, like gear design probably can be solved with AI very quickly. Um, I would say engineering training is something that's meaningful, right? Engineering training is, it's not just a training about like the fundamentals. You understand this equation, you can derive this equation, you remember this equation, but it's more around like, this is a problem. How do we solve this? How do you prioritize it? How do you do the trade-offs? I think trade-offs in hardware are so important. And as a, like traditionally, I think as an engineer just graduating, you might focus only on electrical, or you might only focus on mechanical. And how do you have big impact in a robotics company that has mechanical material, like all the different functionality? I think, the speed of your learning is slow. But I think today, like, people who have that curiosity, who have that drive, can learn so many more about all the disciplines they're working together at a totally different speed from before. I'm really optimistic. I feel like people who want to learn, who want to have an impact, who want to do good engineering, just have so many more tools today to support them. And and then you say, traditionally also like writing test plans. It takes an engineer some training to write good testing plans, because you might not understand what can be tested, right? Or like, say, getting certificate here and there, right? There's a lot of implication of what you can touch, what you cannot touch, what takes long, and so on. Who's going to read those documents? Who loved reading those documents in the past? But now AI can bring a lot of those knowledge, in much faster. So some of the things we do is also like adding like points in your plan of, like, say, gap analysis, deep research, checking like if your requirement, like, in the big environment, anything has changed, you know, because people, like, it's not the best use of the people's time. We want to bring more information to people so they can learn at a different pace.
I'll give you a really concrete example of an optimistic example. In the company I founded and grew, we used to take junior people, sometimes people with biology degrees, and we would bring them on board because what we found is we couldn't find product data managers because everyone was either specific to a system, but actually agnostic product data managers, they didn't exist, so we had to create them. And you'd find very, very bright graduates from good universities who thought in a special way, but also were great with people and communication. And you brought them on board, and they went through a 4-week boot camp. They had support from their peers. They had continuous learning and development. And these people were going straight onto project and facing off to very senior industry types. But we found that actually they became the kind of experts in the room on the best way to execute a product data management strategy, even though they had less than a year under their belt. But it was this, the right information at the right time to these people, combined with the DNA of the way that they thought and the way that they approached things. And it actually, that was the superpower, and that was the reason why these people were so cherished, and everyone wanted them in the organizations they were running. So I do believe that there should be some optimism around young people, and if they have the right toolkit and the right support as they come into these industries, they can actually be game changers for the companies that hire them. So you don't have to have a CV with 20 years of experience. That might even be
That's because they're
a
thinking somewhat
attraction.
outside the box, and they're not constrained by 20 years of doing something the same way.
And they're really focused on that specific topic, that niche. They didn't let's say they didn't care about the engineering itself. They cared about how to support the engineers and how to support the product information flow to get the product out the door on time, at cost, and at the right level of quality. So that was their focus, and that was their niche. That was the thing they excelled at. And again, it was the idea of deconstructing the task. If you deconstruct the task and give it to the person or the technology that can do it best, you'll get far better performance than if you have to kind of force people to do that work. Engineers are being forced to do these kind of tasks, meetings, like information searching, as we said,
Yeah.
Excel spreadsheets, systems, with as part of their daily tasks, and they're just the wrong people for it. They should be engineering. They should be focused on what they do best.
And I think the other thing is people sometimes are limited by what they think the speed of learning could be. So a lot of times it's like you put younger people in an environment that you tell them there's no limit. I think you can do this in one day. They might really turn something in one day, maybe not the perfect one, but they did that in one day. And then their expectation of speed is totally different.
Hmm.
I work with like amazing engineers at Onshape. Some, like have worked at SolidWorks, have long career. They're the most curious people. The other people who don't feel like there's a bound to, how fast you can do things, how well you can do things. And I think that's, like with AI and with this type of tools, it just, I think it's exciting for people like that, because it's like, oh, wow, there's really boundless. And AI is only getting smarter. Like my ability of doing things also get like a little bit boundless, right? Because there are always going to be people who jump out of the traditional, like spectrum of doing things, right? You always have a place for innovation.
So we're getting close to the time. I'm wondering, like, what do you guys think about the future of tribal knowledge and AI as we move into 2026 after experiencing the LLM explosion of 2022-23 and the MCP explosion of 24 or 25? I mean, what's next, and how's that going to impact this whole tribal knowledge topic?
I think it's really gonna spread in 2020. It's already spreading. I think maybe hardware is a little bit late compared to say security. You see so many knowledge system. If you talk about knowledge system, it's actually a well understood thing. I think just like it's coming a little bit late to hardware. And then, I want to add a little bit of things. So in January, we're going to be at CES. So if anyone listening to this, right, want to come to CES, say hi, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. next year, we're also going to spend time in Boston, in LA, in Vegas, in Seattle, in
Nice.
a couple different, and in San
You gonna
Diego.
come to Paris? You gotta come to Paris.
Yeah, we should come to Paris.
Or Hannover
That might be a
Messe, that's
leisure
closer to
trip.
Rob.
Yeah, I'm also going to be in, like Texas, New York. So, if you are interested in, like, meeting us in person, let me know. Yeah.
Thanks. Rob, you any closing comments?
I guess I think that the people that are going to have a significant shift on business performance are going to be the people that are really thinking about the way that work gets done, and that is a big unexplored area. And I think when you see the big breakthroughs in terms of what companies achieve, it's going to be those companies that have thought about this and deconstructed it and changed the way that work is being done. And yeah, that's the thing I'm really excited about. I've been living it for 25 years. We've been the breakthrough in terms of the human part of that, but like if the work we've been doing can be replaced even better by the AI and the types of things that you're developing, then that is really exciting.
Awesome. Well, it's a real pleasure having both of you guys on. It was nice talking to you again, Yay, and always a pleasure, Rob. Next week I have another webcast, this time with Siskit and Epsilon 3, so more about requirements and about manufacturing. And once again, thank you very much to Yi Wang and to Rob Ferrone. And you guys want to say goodbye?
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah, this is a
Yeah.
Christmas edition. And we'll see you,
Get
see you
well
in the
soon
next
as well,
podcast.
Michael. I hope you feel better.
Yeah,
before the
I'm
new year.
trying. I'm on the mend.